Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started here in just a moment. I'm going to give everybody a couple seconds to get logged in. Let everybody know where you're tuning in from in the chat box. This is a global event, and it's really fun to see where our audience and your peers are located. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a chat box and some other options to engage with us. There's also a Q&A option too. We'll use that later when we want you to submit questions throughout the presentation today. All right, we're a couple seconds in here. I think we've given ample time for folks to get situated. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here today. Hello again to everybody, and welcome to the How to Build a Paperless Therapeutic Quality Management System webinar as a part of our 3-day Beyond Compliance event. We're really glad that you're here with us today. This is our final webinar of this 3-day event. I am here today with Jason March and Bennett Klusas, who will be your subject matter experts and speakers today. My name is Lauren. I'm on the marketing team here at Qualio, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. A couple of quick housekeeping items. This session will be recorded. You're going to receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with resources and that recording. If you do not, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here at Qualio. And of course, we want to give a thank you to our co-sponsor for this 3-day event, Qualistry. Qualistry helps pharma professionals like yourselves stay up to date while connecting you with top experts and service providers worldwide. This event would not be possible without Yan and the Qualistry team. Okay, let's talk about how you can interact with us here today. I know that many of you have seen multiple sessions, but just to make sure everybody knows how to engage with us, on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see those options for how to talk to your speakers. Go ahead and introduce yourselves and the other audience members in that chat area. As we pointed out earlier, it's really great to see a global audience here this week. We encourage you to ask questions to our hosts along the way as well. Please send these questions through the Q&A section so that they don't get lost in the chat box. We're going to do our best to answer relevant questions along the way here today, and we'll leave time at the end of the session as well. Let's get to introduce our speakers. Your hosts today are going to be Bennett Klusas, a quality assurance specialist for Vector Biomed, and Qualio's own Jason March, who is our senior quality specialist. Bennett is responsible for implementing and maintaining Vector Biomed's cutting-edge electronic quality management system. From both academic and commercial environments. Jason March has 15 years of experience in life science quality and regulatory roles. Got some background noise there, sounds a little bit better now. Jason March has 15 years of experience in life science quality and regulatory roles. Jason has worked with a string of global regulations and standards with particular knowledge of FDA and ISO requirements. Okay, our agenda for the session today is going to focus first on how to prepare for an eQMS upgrade. We'll then walk through the 3 main steps for evolving from a paper-based system to an eQMS. We're going to leave time for Q&A at the end as always, but again, ask those questions along the way so that we can get to them. We'll take timely, relevant questions as we go throughout the presentation today. Finally, before I hand it over to our speakers, we do want to remind you that Qualio is the all-in-one eQMS enabling therapeutic teams to bring life-saving products to market. Now let's go ahead and get to the topic at hand today. Take it away, Bennett and Jason.
All right, thank you very much, Lauren. And with that, we're going to start talking about why to go electronic with your eQMS. So, one of the big questions here is data integrity, and why are we tying this in with going into an eQMS? So, when we are setting up our eQMS, we want to understand how that relates to the data integrity expectations of regulators. And one such set of those expectations is known as Alcoa++ from the United States FDA. And while we have all the letters there, these are those sorts of traits that you really want to keep thinking about as you look and identify what QMS system you want to implement so that you can achieve these expectations. So let's see that this is all getting over. Nice. So here we think about analog quality management systems. And if you're running on paper, spreadsheets, or even legacy systems that aren't supported, these really are costing your business more than you think. They frustrate your staff. They slow down how you're getting to market. And by their very nature, they make it harder to meet the data integrity expectations of regulators in the current age. So using an eQMS allows you to ditch these paper records, get your system upkeep time taken care of because you're not running back and forth looking for pieces of paper. And they're a lot easier to rapidly deploy across different business sites and allow you to, in real time, track actions. And they take you from having these different repositories of information to actually consolidating all that information in one digital platform where it can be shared across a wide group of people quickly. So for me, when I come to electronic systems, I think of the Alcoa attributes of traceable, attributable, and how paper systems fall short in things like latency to retrievable, the available attribute, how things shift over time and consistency. All problems in eQMS really works to solve.
Yeah, and then what I would also add in there, Bennett, is maybe some pointers about how, when you consider the financial aspect of having an eQMS, you have an initial cost, yes, but you're saving ultimately a lot of time and money, as you pointed out, when you're talking about document retrieval, document storage. For example, if you have a paper document management system, you're having to retrieve those records manually, perform manual updates to them, track them manually, when in reality, with an eQMS, you can do that all in one location, save a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, and those documents have a physical footprint. That's space you pay for.
Absolutely.
So
and
we
when
kind
you
of go
talk
into
about document storage, you're talking about off-site storage costs as well. Sorry, I'm throwing that out there.
absolutely. So now we kind of look into what are the modern eQMS functionalities, and Jason, take us away here.
Yeah, so some of the modern functionalities with eQMS, we kind of touched on it briefly, but really minimizing your process and workflow automation, or sorry, not minimizing, but automizing. I don't know. It's early here still, but making sure that you're automating the kind of the process and workflows there. Configurations with other systems. A lot of eQMS options out there, including Qualio, does allow for connection to other electronic systems. Which, if you're going into an eQMS, you're likely utilizing other electronic systems out there to manage other data. For example, if you're building a product in Jira, or you're managing your product lifecycle management in another system, there are potential connections out there, and that's one of the additional benefits that eQMSs bring. Having the capability of managing data visually with dashboards and using for quality metrics, that's going to be huge from your day-to-day quality management, but also when you're talking about maybe a quarterly or monthly CAPA review, your management review, audits, stuff like that. So you're able to pull data in a relatively quick manner versus manually inputting data into like an Excel spreadsheet or something. And then the additional benefit obviously is the audit trails associated. So you're able to determine, what actions occurred on X date. Everything's tracked. It meets the requirements that 21 CFR Part 11 puts through from the FDA. And then you have your e-signatures, e-signature and a part of that. So you're not manually signing papers anymore either. So those are all very, very high touted benefits.
And even touching on those e-signatures, I think a lot of people here can relate to the point where a paper system stops when it requires a signature of somebody who's not present, and moving to an electronic system allows that person to sign from wherever is necessary. It fits the modern era of more remote work. And we're talking about all these system functionalities, and people usually associate getting one of these systems set up with, large year-long to multi-year-long projects. But really, I think we can find that's not the case. So, Jason, what are you thinking here?
Yeah. So typically, getting up and running in your cloud eQMS space takes around a year. This average obviously is skewed by larger life science organizations, more of an enterprise approach. And then they can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars into multi-year projects, which with unique solutions throughout the business, right? So this kind of brings up how the point of how we approach system implementation. You know, are we looking to approach, or like a company, are you looking to approach individual compliance portions of your eQMS, focus on document management for 3 months, focus on CAPA management for another 3 months, or are you looking to implement an entire system which allows you to get going quickly to make the necessary changes within a workflow, more of an off-the-shelf program? So by implementing a robust eQMS programs where the tools are available and validated, rather than starting from scratch, will allow you to save that much more time and get your processes up and running. Smaller life science organizations that partner with Qualio for eQMS can typically get up within 3 to 6 months, depending on the amount of work involved, size of the business, existing documentation, existing eQMS, existing QMS potential procedures or process flows, versus maybe a company just starting out fresh. That's obviously going to be much quicker. So a 3 to 6 time frame is pretty typical for what we see, which is pretty quick. If you kind of ask around for other eQMS implementation times.
Absolutely. So really, when we're answering the question of why do you want to go electronic, the cost is not as high as a lot of people necessarily think. And when you work with platforms like Qualio, where you're taking more off-the-shelf software, you actually can turn around things a lot quicker. So we know why we want to go electronic now. Let's actually take a look at selecting an eQMS.
So after helping over 600 organizations migrate away from paper to cloud QMS, we've become firm believers that process matters just as much as the product. Any major software initiative requires the alignment of process, people, and technology. Our process has been refined to provide our clients with the fastest possible pathway to value. So here's what we can recommend as an optimal evolution journey from paper to eQMS.
Absolutely. So when you're starting out in trying to select an eQMS, you want to think about how you can align expectations for what this system is going to look like with your audience, your end user base, from management down to the people who are on your production floor or in your tech quality labs. You need to put these questions to them and ask, hey, is what you are looking for a must-have or a nice-to-have? And it's a good time to challenge a lot of those assumptions, because the more specific your requirements when selecting a system, the more bespoke a solution you're looking for, the longer it's going to take to actually implement that bespoke solution. So ask your end users what value is being added by the specifics of each of their requirements. If you're seeing a requirement crop up again and again, that's probably closer to a must-have than a nice-to-have. And the times when you're shifting into an eQMS are prime time to actually update your processes and make things more agile. So what you're really looking at is, what is our flexibility also for changing systems as part of migration to phase out the inefficiencies of the old system? And you still consider what time's going to be needed to close out those existing systems, but you do that with the viewpoint that you're moving to something better. So, Jason, what do you think are some common eQMS problems?
So some of the problems that I think that people run into, poor vendor selection. Obviously, we have that written there. I think that some of the challenges out there is, when you're looking for an eQMS provider, you want to make sure that it's going to meet your needs, and you also want to make sure, to kind of Bennett's point previously, is you're not choosing an eQMS provider based on the very unique bespoke solutions that you have for each individual piece of your organization. You want to kind of step back and determine whether or not it makes sense kind of for your organization going forward. Now, you're going to have unique requirements, obviously, based on each organization, but you want to take the opportunity to make sure that that the vendor selection, your eQMS provider, is going to hit the requirements, right? The other piece that I think is going to be very important is your planning aspect. Um, an eQMS sounds great for your organization. You're going to save a lot of time, effort, you get rid of paper. All of those are huge selling points. But what a lot of people kind of forget and sometimes just maybe jump over is the fact that you do need to plan beyond the initial launch. You need to make sure that you have a focused group of folks who are going to get your content up and going. So procedures, right? If you have an existing set of procedures, make sure to get those in the system. Any process development. So if you have existing CAPA workflows, complaint workflows, ensure that you have folks kind of designated to be a part of the eQMS implementation project to focus on these. Now, all of these pieces don't need to happen at once. So you need to have a proper plan in place and set clear objectives as to how you're achieving success throughout the plan. So, your first set is making sure your validation's in line. Your second set perhaps maybe a core set of SOPs, right? So just make sure you're really looking at those throughout project plans for the planning perspective. Some of the challenges that we've seen are people aren't ready ultimately beyond the idea of moving into an electronic system. So those are kind of some of the common challenges up front, and then beyond that, user training and adoption, right? Making sure that the appropriate folks are actually adopting the use of the system, and not just the key power users that are involved in the implementation. Ensuring that it is scalable to accommodate all of your team growth. So if you're planning on doubling or tripling your team size in the next 2 years, making sure that you can indeed expand to accommodate those needs. And then, balancing customization with out-of-box functionality. Yeah, so making sure that the implementation piece is going to cover the expansion of your process as well, and not being bogged down by very specific process flows. Being able to adopt the out-of-box functionality to configure to the needs of your organization.
Absolutely. And a lot of that actually still flows into when people are setting up these eQMSs. And even if they've made some of their processes more agile, you have to think of people who set up their procedures to only be specific to a single site. If you're an organization that's rapidly scaling and going up, the more customization you put in, the more specific items about, well, this is how we operate this item, this equipment in this room, or this is this process only for this site. Those are going to become your scalability pain points further down the road. So then we really say, hey, these are the thing. This is how we determine what our needs are. Think of it like your user requirement specification for an eQMS. So now we're actually going to go out and we're looking at these vendors to see who can meet our needs. And we hear them. And I mean, you want to know people who know about different eQMSs and how to compare vendors? Jason here, hey, tell them.
Yeah, so do your due diligence. Compare. There's a lot of websites out there, right? That kind of, and I think I touched on that in a couple slides, but allows you to compare and contrast the different eQMS options, right? Some eQMSs are out there for very specific company types. Like if you're a medical device company versus a pharmaceutical company, there are very specific eQMSs out there, but there's also eQMS solutions that allows the use of multiple. Qualio is one of those, right? So it is designed to be used for different company industries, sizes, different budgets. So that's important, right? You want to make sure that you're comparing and contrasting the options out there. Functionality, right? You have to understand that it's going to meet the needs of your organization. So, is it going to, I'll do some comparing. Does it have an in-app document editor? Qualios. The benefits of that obviously is you're going to have consistency, right? Or does it require you to use external services like Microsoft Word, where then you're going to potentially need the use of an individual or more than one to make sure your documents are consistent before they're put into the eQMS. So those are the things you kind of have to make sure are part of your solution. And then, making sure that all of the rest of the needs of the options of the eQMS fits your needs. And then also looking at some third-party customer feedback. So what is the company saying on their website? What are they saying on the sales calls versus what actually is delivered post-implementation? So there is a lot of information out there. So my recommendation would be just to make sure you're looking at the information that is out there and trying to sift through there is some nonsense out there, but there's also a lot of very legitimate content out there. So definitely do your research.
Jason and
Absolutely.
Bennett, I've got a question here in the chat in regards to going paperless and the data associated with it. I want to pose it to you, see if you guys can give an answer here. Monica would like to know, in her work, she says we're trying to go paperless with computerized data, with all analytical data that can be obtained in computerized systems like LabX, Empower, Chameleon. So from a regulatory compliance point of view, is it the right direction to go with analytical data, or is it still required to get all data printed, paper version, stored? What are your thoughts here?
So let's see, and then that little last point on right data protection, server backups and replace so data will not disappear. So keeping in mind that we're sort of assuming you have a data system in place, a lot of that can be trimmed out where you're not necessarily required to get all data printed. It can be pulled from your secure servers and fed into your QMS system as a digital record, because not all records have to be sitting in paper somewhere. We use the advantage of digital files and recent evolutions, especially in regulations, to lower the amount of paper that we have to use. So more and more, you're seeing regulators accept digital documents as the originals rather than just, hey, we've made this file completely digitally. Now let's print it up just so we can sign it, when we have platforms that allow to the maintenance of that data integrity from the secure server to a final quality package. So
yeah, and one other point I would say is if you're ensuring that the eQMS, and I'll use Qualio as an example, so we do this, that they are following particular data protection regulations, and they have the evidence that they're doing so, through maybe a validation approach or whatever, and policies and procedures, which we do have in place. Ensuring that your solution has that's crucial. And then also internally, right? If you have, if you're storing data in other sources, or you have very strict, whatever your industry is or your product, you have very strict data protection or data privacy requirements, then ensuring you have internal policies and procedures which cover that. But yeah, going to an electronic solution 100% is definitely possible while maintaining all of those privacy protection requirements. You just have to make sure you have the appropriate, A, do your due diligence, right? Make sure the solution has those items in place, and B, make sure your internal requirements and policies kind of cover what is necessary there.
Thank you, guys.
As we look at comparing these eQMSs, we know what we need now. We really come to what are the right questions in our search for a vendor. And we broadly categorize some of these as, what is your adaptability of the system you're looking at? If you have feedback, can it get addressed in a reasonable time frame? Are there plans for future upgrades or rollouts, or is this a very set system? It doesn't change unless you're paying for them to change it. But suitability, hey, does it meet those user requirements that you've already gathered? And does it meet your company's objectives? And then really falling into reliability of the system. And honestly, this is one of the points where I think Qualio is strongest, is service uptime and responsiveness of staff. If you have an issue, you want to be you want to be able to communicate quickly and have a fast turnaround on resolving those issues, because the longer those aberrant behaviors in a system go on, the more you're going to have to do to justify that you maintained your data integrity during that time frame. So think about, are they going to keep communicating with you on advancements in their programs as you move forward? And now, really, then, how do you start comparing these folks from their user feedback? Because these are the places we can go to get these questions answered. So, Jason, tell them about these different comparison platforms, because this is where people can answer those questions for themselves and not just get spin.
Yeah, and this is super crucial, I think, related to doing your due diligence for selecting a eQMS platform. These websites, G2, Capterra, Software Advice, these have the capability of allowing users to actually put feedback, and just like Google reviews or something, right? It's very legitimate. It's not, Qualio isn't going in there and touting our own service. That's not the way these work. Now, there's basic functionality items covered there, but users are able to give actual feedback, and we receive this. We do searches. I'm sure other eQMS providers do this as well, to figure out, well, what are users saying out there? Not only what are the feedback we're receiving internally, but what are users saying out there? And we don't just let it go. We actually take it very personal. So we try to improve based on this. So this is something that I would really highly recommend doing. And not even just touting Qualio here, just any software that you're looking to launch within your organization. Ensure you're doing your due diligence. And this is a huge piece of that, looking for actual user feedback. I think that's super crucial.
So we've got our user feedback in here. We understand what questions we need to ask of our systems. So then it really becomes understanding the work that the system's going to entail and planning a timeline and a project around that. And to do that, you're going to be looking into the GAMP5 categories for computerized software assurance. So you have things like GAMP category 3, your non-configurable softwares. Think of these as your Microsoft Word. You don't get to make bespoke workflows in Microsoft Word. You don't get to just define how the program works at all. And then you have GAMP category 4, and this is really the sweet spot of, it's a configurable software, but it's using all common functions that have already undergone a lot of this computerized system validation or assurance work. And then you're getting into GAMP 5, which is when you're looking at more of your custom bespoke softwares. One that comes to mind is like a TrackWise, where every part of it entails so much work going in that each new function you add has to be separately validated to ensure it's meeting data integrity requirements. Qualio here is really more like a box of Legos, where they are providing you all of these parts that are already suitable for use, and you're able to put them together as you want. The box of Legos comes off the shelf, but you don't have to worry about putting in a bunch of additional work to actually meet your computerized system assurance or validation requirements. So,
I like that. I like that approach to the box of Legos.
I do too.
So yeah, I've been personally, I've launched eQMS systems prior to Qualio, back in my industry days, and I've gone through all of the work it takes to actually validate each section. Writing out all of the steps, saying that it works, and providing objective evidence. The days of that with systems like Qualio are gone. Qualio uses a CSA approach with it, which is oh my gosh, I'm on this computerized software assurance, or I think. Basically, we validate the system, and your individual instance, it's already covered. So the system functions, right? We validate the system, and what you basically do is you receive the validation content, the documentation, all of our objective evidence that we performed on the entire system, and you just perform a review and have that content in your Qualio instance, so you can have the validation, but you're performing a review and approving it as a document. This approach can take a day or less, depending on your approach to it, right? You can read through every single line and take a little bit more. You can validate the entire approach yourself if you'd like to. We provide that option, but you don't need to. There's no requirement around that. So we perform that validation internally, and that goes in line with all of the changes that we make. So every time we update a portion of the tool, right, we perform our due diligence, and if there is new validation objective evidence, then we put that on the where it lives, and you have a link to where all of the objective evidence is. And you don't need to do anything. So there's no upkeep on your end from a validation perspective. So that's, I think, super crucial when it comes to time and money saved on your eQMS solution.
Yeah, and that ties back to our earlier questions about adaptability and the support of the system, and saying like, hey, yeah, this is a living system. And as it evolves, is your selected vendor going to be keeping ahead of industry trends and making sure that things are documented? Are they going to be able to keep offering you improvements of your system, or is this going to go down the path of becoming a legacy system? So we've asked all these questions of our vendors. We've gathered what we're looking for. We've picked somebody. We have selected our vendor. So where do we go from here? And really, you need to start managing for success at this point. You've selected a system, so you need to discuss with your vendor the way that teams are going to be getting access to that system and the live environments, the design environments. You need to determine what needs to be present when you're going live to the rest of your end users at your company. And we're going to bring this up again. You need to start winding down those old systems, because you don't want to be managing two systems at once. So you need to ask some of these critical questions up front and think of the qualities, data integrity that you can improve upon as you enter this system.
And
So
it goes into your that project planning, right? Making sure that it's all
yeah,
part of that. And then, the establishing that communication path up front, super crucial. Understanding what's going to happen during onboarding. How often am I going to meet with you? What am I going to be receiving in a detailed manner? What happens post onboarding, right? One of the things I'd like to mention here, well, actually a couple. So one of the programs that Qualio has had for a couple of years now is a Qualio Plus program, where we provide, as a small team of people, we provide content, already or written out content that's more or less the 80 to 85% ready to go, meets the need of a certain regulatory requirement, and then you kind of adopt it to your own internal processes. So that could be something you receive to kind of get that flow going. But also the other piece of this is, before I move on, part of the Qualio Plus implementation is ongoing meetings, right? So communication's huge. So ongoing meetings throughout the onboarding process, whether it's with an onboarding manager or industry expert, that's something that can be offered. But everyone who signs up with Qualio, you don't need a particular plan. You get the option of having support available anytime you need. We have 24/5 coverage, so 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. And the response time's pretty quick. So, using our support team throughout, whether you're onboarding, whether you're post implementation, but understanding that you have that access is very key to your success as well.
absolutely. And with that support, you can really begin to actually set up for your migration and go live. So we really walk into the Vector Biomed story here. My personal entry in the company came in when we had already selected Qualio. So I had a clear, defined objective for my position, and that was set up an eQMS system for go live within 3 months. And I needed to take stock of what we had and what we needed to address. So for our assets, we had that Qualio Plus library of content. We had the migration support. We had the Qualio validation system. More importantly, our company hadn't started GMP production yet. We didn't have all these GMP systems stood up. And we put those as assets because these are things that we don't have to worry about transitioning or winding down. This allowed our implementation team to be empowered in how we got things moving. Whereas our liabilities were our pre-existing paper-based system that had to get wound down. And we did have work that needed to occur in a GMP fashion ongoing in the style of facility commissioning and equipment qualification so that we could fire these all at once. And more importantly, it's a startup environment. You're going to have that limited decision maker availability. So when I first encountered this problem, the first thing I did was go into the actual Qualio program and start calling out the help teams and being like, hey, how do I do this? I don't have time to just figure this out on my own. How can I leverage the expertise of my vendor here? So we've got these assets, we've got these liabilities. How can we get started? And that comes into understanding our system's strengths and weaknesses, looking at workflows and how they function at different user levels. Because remember, the blue that one person sees is not necessarily the blue that other folks might see. And how can we consolidate everything that's here for a leaner process? How can we not just do what everybody's always done and instead transition into something better? So I started with engaging in critical conversations, and part of that was having frank discussions about what system capabilities are with our decision makers. And rather than focusing on specific language points, I was able to frame design discussions with clear, basic questions. It's not about, hey, why is this line written this particular way? Instead, I wanted to understand from them, what is your high level needs of this system? And when you're working with all these different people, especially in a startup environment where a lot of your staff have come from different companies, you need to align your language early on because you need to make sure people understand things in the same text. So say somebody is used to calling deviations or nonconformances, you need to help those people align that language together so that they understand, okay, that's what this means. I actually do understand about this and can use my old information to help me move forward. So you're framing things about how, what you're asking what needs to happen. You're asking when it needs to happen, where, why, but you frame it all around that system capability and you align your people. So taking one more slide to talk to this is just about no paving of the cow paths. And Jason has a great way of speaking to this. So take us away, Jason.
Use this opportunity to change and optimize things, right? You may have to what Bennett kind of discussed a little bit. You may have some existing processes in place. You don't always just need to move those one for one into your eQMS. Really take a look at what the eQMS can help you minimize as far as process goes. Or potentially be a little more efficient, right? Eliminate some documents or process steps that you may not need. For example, if you are today in a paper environment, everything's manual. Obviously, you don't have to think about or worry about moving a piece of paper from one place to the next. It's all within the system. So that eliminates some steps right there. But then think about, well, what other things can I make a little more efficient here? How can I drive continuous improvement? So there are many different ways of doing that. So use this discovery process to uncover some redundancies in workflows, in any weak spots in your unnecessary complexity. There may be more than you think. If you've been with an industry for a very long time, you're probably used to doing things for a very long time a certain way. You kind of have to step back a little bit and ask yourself, what do I need versus what we're just used to. So take the opportunity to really dive into those things within the eQMS implementation instead of just throw it all in there and trying to make it work, because quite often you'll run into some challenges down the road that you have probably making things harder than you need to.
Absolutely. So coming back to the vector story, I'm 1 month into this 3-month project, and where are we? Well, we had established something critical for our future success, and that was the system for making systems. We had decided who had to be involved in each decision. We got their comfort and experience with each of these processes, and expectations as well as language had been largely aligned. So let's check back in here and say, hey, 1 month in, we've learned our system's strength. There's the ability to tag different groups in. We have easily changeable templates, libraries, potential workflows, and one of my favorite features, smart linking. The ability that when somebody interacts with a document reference, they are getting pulled into that document immediately. They're not engaging in a search process that would slow them down further. They're seeing the current information now. And we had really learned the shape of our system. We knew there were a couple weaknesses because we didn't properly understand our user limits. We needed a solution to how we're going to modify training statuses and work on document formatting. But there were solutions to each of these items. And we also had begun to get future users set up so that we could consistently maintain that visibility into the different user experiences. So for us, there are 3 user level types. There's your system administrator, your quality level role. You had your normal roles of people who were generating content actively and routing this for review and approval. And then you had your basic level folks, your bottom of the ladder people who just needed a system to engage with and register their training through. So we had gotten all of these discussions done, and now we had to respond to those challenges. So our system selectors hadn't chosen the correct user types that our organization required, and we got this rapidly rectified. One of those just do it things that made it better long term for our team's go live. And while we saw some document formatting challenges, we were able to just communicate these issues to the Qualio team and immediately get an interim plan to handle it together. So again, that responsiveness in your provider is such a huge factor. And finally, we had established, hey, we need to know how we can triage documents that'll get migrated. So non-executable documents, think of them as your policies, your procedures. We said we're going to migrate this into our Qualio templates, while executable documents that we already had on hand would get scanned and uploaded with new doc numbers assigned to them. So when I say executables, think your protocols, the forms that are associated with your procedures, worksheets, test results. And we had put that plan together. So it's come time for executing. 2 months in, we had been building expertise from the top down, because the people who are going to do the best job training the end users are their direct supervisors. So we had all department heads set up with accounts in the system. They'd all experienced it, begun to get familiar with the system and how to navigate through it and use it to its fullest degree. We'd gotten training sessions together for our system schedule. We even had material prepared, and we had found non-leadership power users. Why are you pulling in non-leadership people when you want it to go from top down? That's because we also wanted people at that base level to help provide further input, because the people who are interfacing most had more time available. So we've gotten these folks into the system, we've started training them up into it, and we've accounted for a bunch of our potential risks. So we briefed everybody on the phased approach to migration to ensure that the system met expectations before we'd gone doing all this additional work. That's cutting down rework. And we had a firm exit strategy from our paper-based system, and we'd begun to wind it down. So workflows were being cut off at that point, and things were getting started in Qualio from 2 months in. So now it came time to actually set up systems within our eQMS. And to meet our goals, we had to get a few systems up, including how are we going to handle training? How are we going to manage deviations and kappas and change requests and supplier qualification? And for that, we were bringing in the power users. And as things got into full swing, power users from the critical groups came in, and they helped us stress test each of these new workflows, identify pain points, and we were able to see what our training material lacked so we could improve it for the future. And by doing all of this prior to the go live, where changing the system would become a lot more difficult or potentially cumbersome, we now had this variety of perspectives in here to help us actually make a better system before we even got to that point.
And can I just point out that this was performed in the sandbox environment, right? So like you have the capability of doing that, building your workflows in that test environment prior to going live, so you're not worrying about messing with your live environment, right?
Exactly. And that is definitely one of the most critical things is always make sure you've got a design environment to train people in. It's such an improvement for people to be able to experiment with things and stress test them in a system that isn't subject to auditing. It's literally a playground where we can test improvement ideas and see exactly how it's going to work in the live system, because it is the live system. It's just another environment within it that is outside of auditing scope.
Mm-hmm.
So we're 2.5 months in, and we're at the soft launch of our Qualio live production environment. We'd gotten all of our initial migrations completed. Everything was undergoing its final spot check. All our decision makers and department heads had gotten formal documented training, and they were beginning to approve a lot of these migrated documents and say, yep, that's the content I wrote before. These are all the modifications we agreed to. Yes, this looks good. And we were also able to bring in our power users into the live environment so that they could start resume a lot of those workflows that from the paper system that had been wound down. So there's only one person was formally responsible for the go live at our company. This would mean a major bottlenecking of issue resolution. So we had leveraged the organic behavior that people had when they encountered an issue at work, and we let those go to their department heads by training them throughout the past month so that they could go do the organic thing and ask their supervisor first about how to resolve an issue rather than having to lean on a potential bottleneck of one system admin. So now I just want to touch on system validation. And it's just like Jason said, due to Qualio's validation approach, we had started looking at everything by the end of month 1. And all we really needed to do was define what our system state would be. Hey, what are our document templates? What are the requirements we're putting on these things? What is our snapshot of our system as it currently looks? And a couple of weeks prior to launch, we had a clear picture of our system. So completed our validation documents within, I think, 3 days, and able to get Qualio qualified as a supplier. So we had all of those points covered.
Yeah, and that's super important about the option that we give as far as the validation. I will say that this has provided some uncomfortable feelings for some of our customers coming from environments in the past where having to do all of the specific validation at the customer site. With Qualio's approach, there's no additional regulatory requirements that you perform any additional validation on your own. So you can accept Qualio's validation because it validates the entirety of the system, and that will be sufficient. Now, there will be some specific configurations that that may be different from site to site, right? I expect that, but that's kind of where your processes come in place. So when you have specific processes and workflows in place, and if you're ever questioned about, how can you prove that you went through this and ensure that it meets the needs, right? Quality is validated. Here's the content to prove that. And then here's our specific process document. And here's the process workflow that follows the process document. Sorry, I kind of went a little bit above and beyond there, Bennett, but I kind of wanted to touch there a little bit because
hey,
I saw a
absolutely,
question.
Jason.
I saw a question pop through, and I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, and I'd be more than happy to touch on it additional if necessary. But I just feel like it's important that people understand that there's no shortage of concern out there with this validation approach,
sure.
the CSA approach, but it doesn't miss out on any regulatory requirements. That it does meet the regulatory requirements that are put out there. FDA doesn't tell you how to validate your system. It tells you that you need to have a validated system, right? So it's how you approach the actual validation approach.
And I mean, spot on. I mean, we had no shortage of skeptics over here about the validation approach. And once they dug into the documentation, there was nothing else for them to really say. They were like, yeah, it's wow, it's actually all here. Nothing really else to do, and we had a clear pathway. So we've talked a bit about that system validation where we're. So how do we wrap up the vector story? So our go live was awesome. All users at launch had those sandbox accounts, and their training was all done in those accounts. As soon as they were done with their trainings, they all had live accounts prepared for immediate use. We got training done within a single week and had good participation from all employees. And this rolls into how it's all worked out for us today. Since we implemented just a couple of months ago, we have over 500 documents in progress with over 400 of them effective. We have these functioning quality event systems and an approved supplier program with 30 suppliers in varying states of approval and a 95% training completion. So we haven't identified any needs for major system reworks, and it went so well that we had our first GMP production back in November. And that's what the power of some of these questions really is giving us the ability to move quickly, and we don't have to break things. We've moved quickly and accomplished our goal while complying. And that's the real promise of eQMS platforms that are well implemented and well planned for. So with that, we've got Qualio, and I'll tell you, they've done well by us. They have done awesome work in enabling therapeutic teams to bring life-saving products to market. And hey, 3 months from we picked this system to implementation is something I could not have imagined prior to this position. So, yeah, the last thing we have is, are there any questions, folks? Any things we can answer for you?
Oops, I was on mute there. Thank you guys both so much. That was so wonderful to get a walkthrough of just what this transition is like from going paperless, especially with a customer story weaved in. So thank you, Bennett. I do have 2, maybe 3 questions I'd love to shoot at you guys before we wrap things up for this session and for this event. We did get a great question that came through from Mike. Would love to put that here on the screen for you all. Does the Qualio eQMS conform to the regulatory and quality requirements of both device and Forma? Do the template procedures provided with the Qualio system conform to the requirements? And then you can see some more specific question on requirements. What would you like to say to this, you guys?
Yeah, so I'll touch on this a little bit. I'll say, so first of all, Qualio as an eQMS company, there's no short answer is yes, right? It depends on your internal policies and procedures as far as what kind of happens next. So with respect to device and pharma, right, you're going to have specific regulatory requirements to meet that you need to meet, and that's going to be up to you to kind of put policies and procedures and workflows in place to do that. Qualio itself, as an eQMS platform, meets the needs for these both any international regulations, FDA regulations, the standards out there. It kind of is that next step as far as what you need to do as an organization to put in place to kind of continue to meet the needs for your respective area. With respect to the templates, the templates so we provide some core templates, but those are all customizable by you. So when I say template, I mean that like an outline of a particular document, right? You can change that outline of the document. So if you have 7 different sections in your procedure versus 10, let's say we offer 10 and you have 7, you can modify that in the template, and then any new documents you can make sure that aligns with that. So it's configurable to meet the needs of you and your organization, so no matter what standard or regulation you're adhering to. So that's the kind of the beauty of it, is you can allow that you can do what you need to do to meet the needs for your area.
And at the risk of this not just being about templates, which, by the way, there's no need to revalidate when you update templates. You just get to make them again, back to our box of Legos. But if you're asking about template procedures, as in like the Qualio Plus offerings, yes, they actually do have separate Qualio Plus libraries for medical device versus pharma and other more specific requirements. And within a lot of those procedures that they've provided, they actually state the CFR codes, the ISO regs, or the ICH items that those procedures are meeting the needs of.
Yeah, our team spends a lot of time making sure that these procedures are constantly updated. Whether that be because of a change to a particular standard or regulation, which we all know doesn't happen too frequent, but when it does, we like to stay on top of that. Or potentially, if we add any international geography to those particular procedures, we do our due diligence to ensure any potential gaps and then fill those gaps. With Qualio Plus, we also provide those updated procedures periodically to our customers, so they're not stuck with their outdated version. Knowing all the while that customers probably have taken it and made it their own, we still want to provide any updates so that those gaps could be filled if there are any.
Wonderful. You guys, thank you so much for giving a detailed answer to that question. At this point, it does look like my colleagues have answered a couple of questions here on the back end, so I think it's time for us to close up shop here. But first, I'd like to let Ashley and Yan come on to thank our attendees for the event this week. Jason and Bennett, thank you so much for your time and for all of the detail that went into this presentation. I'll let Ashley take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Lauren, Bennett, Jason. This has been a fantastic way to end our 3-day Beyond Compliance, Unlocking Therapeutic Quality Excellence here with Qualio and Qualistry. I want to thank everyone for participating, the presenters, Yan and Qualistry, all of our fantastic questions and answers, and all of the messages. And I've been starting to see a bunch of people post about their certificates in the last couple of days on LinkedIn. So please just keep that rolling. As a reminder, all of these sessions are going to be on demand and recorded. So give us a few days to recoup from this amazing 3-day event. And we'll be sending out some emails, sending out the recordings, and definitely giving you all the educational content that you can. Yan, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. So on behalf of Qualistry, I want to thank our amazing audience and our amazing speakers for those 3 amazing days. So we had such interesting topics, and it was an incredible journey. And a lot of thanks to Ashley and the Qualio team for co-organizing it. And we are planning more events with Qualio throughout the year, so stay tuned. And we will see you soon throughout the next months. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, morning, wherever you are. Thank you for attending.